Hello and welcome to the next webinar in our series being offered by the Pennsylvania School Counselors Association. My name is Amelia Pfeiffer and I'm the Executive Director of PSCA. And this webinar will be based on the 7th section of the RAMP application, which is lesson plans, classroom and small group. And just like all of the other ASCA webinars that we have presented, these are based on the 4th edition of the ASCA National Model. So what you can hope to learn through this webinar is, first of all, you should be able to develop a thoughtful lesson plan using the ASCA lesson plan template. And then you should also be able to use the RAMP scoring rubric as a guide to help you complete this section of the application. So many of you are like me, you're a school counselor without a teaching background. So you never taught, you don't have a teaching degree, same as me. So if you're like me, you probably had never written lesson plans before becoming a school counselor, or you may not have written any lesson plans yet in your career. Those of you that have been trained as teachers, you're a little bit more comfortable with this process. So what I'm going to walk you through tonight is just the whole step-by-step, how to fill it out. And ASCA really does provide a nice template that breaks it down and is very user-friendly and makes it easy for you to complete lesson plans, even if this is your first time doing it. The reason we use lesson plans is, first of all, they ensure what content will be delivered and whether you're delivering that in a classroom or in a small group. So that's how it will be delivered and to whom it will be delivered. That's all going to be stipulated on the lesson plan template that you use. The other thing is teachers are always giving an exam or a test to make sure that, students learned what they were being taught in that particular lesson or unit. So these lesson plans will also show how students will attain the goals and how whether those goals were attained or not will be evaluated, and what types of data will be collected to evaluate the attainment of those goals. So this is, in a nutshell, what the template looks like. I know it's a little smashed in here. Just like all of the other templates, this is available for download from the ASCA website at schoolcounselor.org. And you're able to download it, and then you can, fill it in as you would like. This same lesson plan here is used for classroom instruction, those guidance lessons we used to call them, as well as any small groups that you're giving. You would do one lesson plan per small group session. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is this template, even though you're using it here and you're filling it in here, when you go to apply for RAMP, the actual RAMP application doesn't have a section for you to upload this lesson plan. What you're doing on the RAMP application is you're filling this out right in the application. So every section on here is a section in the application that you're just typing in. So this allows you to fill this in ahead of time for when you go to fill out the RAMP application, so that you're better prepared to do that when you get into the application. So I'm going to go through this, as I said, step by step. I apologize, this is a little bit jumbled here, but I just took pieces of the template and we're just going to do a little bit at a time here. So the very first thing you can see is you have to give your lesson a title. I am a high school counselor, so my titles tend to be kind of bland, like, career lesson or transcript lesson, something like that. Whereas I know you elementary school counselors out there, yours are a little more fun, a little more creative. But this is whatever you want to title your lesson, that is up to you. The next question here is, who is the school counselor that's delivering it? So whether that's you or someone else, their name goes in here. And then next to target audience, you're simply filling in the students that you plan to deliver this lesson to. So if it's 8th graders, you're going to write in 8th grade students. So I will show you an example later of what you could write for your target audience. And then you want to choose no more than 3 student mindsets and behaviors. So the reason that you're limited to 3 is because it is very difficult to teach more than that in one lesson. So it's limited to 3, but you actually might want to just think about having only 1 or 2 mindsets and behaviors on this lesson plan. And the other thing is that you go back to the mindsets and behaviors action plan for classroom and group, which was a couple webinars ago, a couple sections ago. You want to make sure that what is listed on that action plan matches up to what you have here on your lesson plan. They all flow together. So once you create that action plan, then you should be able to figure out, okay, what lessons do I want to deliver to make sure that I'm teaching these mindsets and behaviors to the students. And then finally, there's a section here for the number of the lesson. So let's say you're going into a classroom and you're just doing one lesson and that's it for the day. It's not part of a unit or anything like that. It's just a standalone lesson. So you would write in here 1 of 1. Now, if you're doing a unit and you go in maybe 3 or 4 times into a classroom, I have career lessons that I go in and I do once per 9 weeks, once every quarter. So in that case, that would be 4 lessons in a unit. So I would title the lesson plans 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. And that's the same for your small groups. So if you have a small group that has 6 sessions, you're meeting 6 times, your lesson plan then would be 1 of 6, 2 of 6, and so on. I do want to caution you, though, that if you are filling this out for a small group or for a lesson that is a unit, that is more than one standalone lesson, you should keep the mindsets and behaviors consistent on all of the lesson plans within that unit and within that small group, because you are choosing the mindsets and behaviors that you want to put forth to teach within that entire group or within that entire lesson. Okay. The next part are the learning objectives or competencies that you are expecting the students to learn once they are finished with your lesson. You want to make sure that these learning objectives match up with the mindsets and behaviors that you selected in the last section. So if you have one that is a competency based on building relationship skills, then one of the learning objectives might be students will learn how to develop better relationships with their peers, something like that. So it's very important that what the learning objectives are for your students, what you expect them to learn, matches up to the mindsets and behaviors that you chose to teach to them. And then this section here is basically just asking, what materials do you need to deliver this lesson? so that if someone else, maybe another school counselor in your department or something like that, came along and they picked up this lesson plan, they would know what materials they would need before they went into the classroom or into the small group to deliver this lesson. This next section here under materials focuses on the evidence base that this lesson plan is coming from. And there are 4 listed here, and I'm going to try to explain the difference between the 4 of these. And I want you to know that you don't have to just check off one of these as your evidence base. You can select more than one if the lesson fits the category of more than one of these evidence bases. So the first category is best practice. Best practice is basically lessons that you have given in the past, or maybe you have asked colleagues for to deliver a certain lesson, and they have found that it had been effective in the past. So you're going to continue to use it. So that's basically your best practice lessons. The next category is action research, and teachers use this a lot, so school counselors can as well. Action research is when you decide what theory or other practice that you might want to use that is based on research that you might want to use to develop your lesson. So as it's called action research because as you're teaching it, that's the action that you're taking based on the research that you read. So that's action research, which is a little bit different than research informed. Research informed is when you're looking at peer-reviewed articles that provide, research on certain topics that you might be interested in teaching. You look up that research and then you base your lesson on that research. You're not actually doing the action part of it. You're not teaching it to see how effective it is. You've already found in the research that it's effective. So you're going to use that research to inform how you create the lesson. And then finally, evidence-based. These are usually lessons like Second Step or Why Try that either are purchased or they're given to you, but they have already been tested several times by many school counselors across the nation. And so when you research maybe a canned lesson or unit to teach, you want to see if it is evidence-based. If it tells you that it's evidence-based, that means that it has already been tried out by many school counselors and it has been found to be effective. And like I said, if you want to choose more than one of these, you can do that on this lesson plan. So let's get into the procedure. The procedure, again, is for, like I said, if someone else were to come in and take your lesson plan and deliver your lesson for you, this procedure should tell them exactly how to do that. And this template breaks it down step by step for you so that you know from the introduction to the closing exactly how you're going to deliver that lesson. So the first step is to introduce. So how are you setting up the lesson? How are you telling the students, what you're going to be doing that day, either in the classroom or in the small group? And then you have to communicate the lesson objectives. So those learning objectives that you had earlier in the lesson plan, how are you communicating those to the students? You could write down, say to the students, today you will be learning relationship skills or something like that, and you just write that all out. The next step is teaching the content. So What steps are you going to be using to teach the actual content? Maybe you have a PowerPoint presentation that you're going to show the students. Maybe you're doing a demonstration. So you want to make sure that you write that in here. And then the next part is practice content. So how are you allowing the students to practice what you have just taught them? So you might have them doing role plays, or you might have them writing something out. So that's practicing the content. And then the next step is summarizing. So how do you sum up everything that they had learned that day and kind of get them, back to their, maybe you had moved them around the class, maybe they were sitting in small groups or something like that. So how do you get them back to their seats and back to as they were at the beginning of the class or the small group? And then finally, close. How are you closing it out? And you might put in here, hand out the post test or something like that, or exit ticket, something like that for the closing. The next part is the data collection plan. How are you going to collect data to show that this lesson was effective and that it taught the students what you wanted them to learn, basically? So the first part is participation data. Anticipated number of students, you would just type that in. So if you're doing an entire 8th grade class and there's 130 students in the 8th grade, you would write 130. Planned length of the lesson, if it's a 45-minute class, you would write 45-minute class, something like that. Or if it's a 30-minute group, you could write 10 or 5 30-minute small group sessions, something like that. You could see up here, it says for multiple lessons in a unit, this section only needs to be completed one time. So if you have 5 sessions in a small group with 5 different lesson plans, the participation data should be the same for all 5 of those small groups. And then the mindsets and behavior data. Actually, for the RAMP application, you have to upload the pre and post test assessment or pre and post assessment. So it's not really necessary to write anything in here if you are attaching the pre and post assessment or if you're uploading it to the RAMP application, say. Otherwise, you could write in there the questions that you're going to ask them to evaluate how have their attitudes, skills, or knowledge changed before the lesson to after the lesson. Another thing that's important when you develop your pre and post assessments is, again, you're going to go back to first those mindsets and behaviors that were selected for this lesson plan and the learning objectives for this lesson. So if you are targeting 2 specific mindsets or behaviors, you want to make sure that you ask about those 2 mindsets or behaviors in your pre and post test. I'm sorry, we're going to the next page for the final type of data, which is, of course, the outcome data. So the students learn something, does it really make a difference? And the three areas that you can look for are either within their achievement, their attendance, or their discipline. Just like when you're developing your annual student outcome goals, they are always based on either student achievement, student attendance, or student discipline. So you will be only choosing one for each lesson. So you're not going to be looking at achievement, attendance, and discipline data. It's impossible to try to affect all 3 of those outcomes within one lesson. So you really want to just describe, first of all, which one are you choosing that you're hoping to make an impact upon? And second of all, what are you going to look at? So within achievement, we'll be examining third quarter grades from English class. And then once we deliver this lesson on study skills, now we're going to look at their fourth quarter grade in English class. So it's basically just a description of the data that you're going to look at to determine whether your lesson had an impact on student outcomes. You want to be careful here because this is basically just a description of the outcome data. It is not the actual data that you're collecting. Because remember, you're developing a lesson plan before you actually go into the classroom or before you actually run that small group. So you're not going to have any actual data to put in here yet in terms of numbers. So this is not the place where you're reporting that. This is simply to say, this is the outcome that I am hoping to achieve after delivering this lesson or this unit or this small group. So that's what the entire lesson plan contains on it. Now I would just like to show you an example of a lesson plan. This is taken directly from the second edition of the implementation guide. Remember, that's the book that has the blue cover, but it also has a little white circle on it to designate that it is aligned to the fourth edition of the ASCA National Model, not the third edition. So this is an example found within that book. You could see the title of this lesson is Understanding Bullying, Stopping Mean Behaviors. Here's the school counselor's name, and their target audience was 8th grade students. It doesn't have the number of students there, it's just simply 8th grade students. And then for the mindsets and behaviors, here they've chosen 2. One BSS2, which is create positive and supportive relationships with other students. And then BSS8, demonstrate advocacy skills and ability to assert self when necessary. And you can see this is a part of a 3-lesson unit. So this is the second lesson within that unit. So the learning objectives here, which again, these should be based upon the mindsets and behaviors. So they've listed 2 here. Students will be able to state personal needs and wants respectfully when needed. So here it's ability to assert self when necessary, and also to be able to respectfully state personal opinions and thoughts during disagreements. So that's part of creating positive and supportive relationships. It's also part of demonstrating advocacy skills and ability to assert self. So these learning objectives line up very well with these mindsets and behaviors. You don't want to have learning objectives that have nothing to do with the mindsets and behaviors. That wouldn't be the purpose of the lesson then. Materials, PowerPoint presentation, a computer, a projector, chart paper, and a marker. And that's all they wrote there. That's, simple, just basic, whatever you need to deliver this lesson. And then again, under evidence-based, you could see they checked off 2. They checked off action research and research informed. So that tells me that this lesson was based on some research that they did when they were trying to determine, okay, how can we teach how to stop mean behaviors? So they did some research on some ways to do that. And they're also putting that research into action. And then they're going to determine if the action is effective in teaching how to stop mean behaviors. So going off of the evidence base again, the next section is the procedure. So I really wanted to show you this part because sometimes it's difficult to think, okay, how am I going to write down every single thing I'm going to do within that classroom or that small group? So this example is nice and succinct, and it kind of just shows you here's the main things that you should be writing down. And it looks like it is found on page 98 of the implementation guide. So first, introduce. So it says review content from lesson 1 of this unit. Remember, this is a 3-lesson unit. Talk about and define mean behaviors. Ask for examples without naming any names, of course. Next, you're going to communicate the lesson objectives. So they're going to say, today's lesson will focus on types of mean behavior and what to do when it happens. It could be just that simple, one sentence. Teach content. So here now they've put in some specific things. First, they're going to ask some discussion questions, and they have those listed here. And then they'll do a review of the PowerPoint. They'll go over the slides, asking questions and discussing each. Ask for examples to check for understanding during the presentation. If you are applying for RAMP, you can upload the PowerPoint that you're using for the lesson as a supplemental document if you wish. It's not absolutely necessary, but it is possible if you'd like to do that. And then question. So they plan, after doing the PowerPoint and showing that to the students, they plan to ask, who has been cyberbullied here? Why is cyberbullying such a problem? And why are bystanders so important? And then after they teach the content, then remember the students have to practice the content. So this lesson has the students brainstorm in small groups to find ways that they can stop mean behaviors. And then each group will choose one of their ideas and create a role play for the class. So then they will also role play their idea. So you have brainstorming and you have role playing for practicing the content of this lesson. And then you're going to do your summary. So they're summarizing by continuing the list that started during the role plays, asking groups to bring up other ideas or strategies that were discussed in their small groups, add them to the chart, and then leave the chart in the classroom for students to reference, especially because this is the second unit out of a second lesson out of a 3-lesson unit. So maybe they're leaving the chart there until the 3rd lesson in the unit. And then to close, they're going to provide a summary of lesson 1 and lesson 2, and then advise students to use their own ideas when and if they encounter this type of mean behavior. Identify the main focus of lesson 3, which is the next and last lesson of this unit. So in this case, they're not giving the pre-assessment because that would have been given before the first lesson in this unit. And they're not giving the post-assessment because that would be given after the last lesson, the next lesson in this unit. And then under data collection plan, the anticipated number of students are all students in 8th grade, delivered in the 8th grade connections classes. And the planned length of the lesson, 45 minutes. Nothing's written here because again, you can attach the pre and post assessment. And then outcome data for this lesson, they chose discipline. They will review discipline referrals for reported bullying incidents. They will make comparisons between timeframes before and after the lesson, as well as comparing the numbers between this year and previous years. So there's no actual data in here. There's no actual numbers. It's just describing what data they will look at. And in this case, it's disciplinary referrals. And then follow-up. School counselor will follow up on complaints, conduct small groups with students, and follow county protocol to report incidents of bullying. Just so you know, this section here, this follow-up, this is not required, nor is it on the lesson plan template. However, in the ASCA National Model, if you're reading through there, they do tell you that you should think about how to follow up on your lessons. Maybe you look at this lesson or this unit as a tier 1 intervention, and then you're going to pull students from there that you've identified that might need more level of support, maybe a tier 2. And so then they've chosen to conduct small groups with those students. So that's all part of follow-up. Again, it's not required on the template, but it is encouraged for you to do. And you can write that on here at the bottom of the lesson plan if you wish to do that. So now I'd like to go over the RAMP rubric that scores this section of the RAMP application. And again, this is section 7, lesson plan, classroom and group, which is a section on the 4th edition of the RAMP application. And the 3rd edition of the RAMP application, the lesson plan was in a couple different sections. It wasn't its own section as it is now. So this is what the rubric looks like. As you can see, this section is worth 5 points. So there's 7A, 7B, 7C, 7D, and 7E. The points are all or nothing, as they are with every section in the RAMP rubric. So you either earn a point for that section or you don't earn a point. And most importantly, you must meet all descriptors within each section to earn the 1 point. So under 7A, for example, there are 7 points here, and all of these must be met in order for you to earn that 1 point for this section. 7B, there's 2 under there. 7C, there's 8 sections under there that must all be checked off in order to earn the point. So even if you've earned 7, but the 8th one is not checked off, you will not get a point in that section. 7D has 4, and then 7E I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So let's break this down a little bit further here. First of all, you can see it says upload the following document, the mindsets and behaviors pre and post assessment. The pre-test is administered before each standalone lesson or before the first lesson or group session. So again, it only has to be given once, especially in a small group. You're not giving the pre-test before each small group and then the post-test after each group session, I should say. So you're only giving the pre-test 1 time before that first session, and then the post-test you're only given 1 time after the last session. Now, like I said, if it's a standalone lesson that you just go in and give 1 time, then yes, you would give the pre-test before the lesson and the post-test after the lesson. So 7A, worth a point. The template is completed accurately. So it basically goes through all of those sections of the template that I went through with you, and it just makes sure that all of them are completed accurately. And then 7.A7 is that the assessment is attached. So in this section, the other thing to realize is that you are going to be submitting 1 set of lesson plans for a small group. So whether you have 4 sessions in that small group or 10 sessions in that small group, you have to submit a complete set of lesson plans for that whole small group. So if there's 4 sessions, there has to be 4 separate lesson plans. If there's 6 sessions, 6 separate lesson plans. So that's for the small group. For the classroom lessons, you have to have 3 lesson plans. So they can be either 3 standalone lessons, or it could be 3 lesson plans within 1 unit. You just make sure that you mark them 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and 3 of 3. So those are required. But you can see here where it says upload the following document, you're not uploading the actual template. Like I said, you are just typing that right into the application for each one of those lesson plans that you have to submit. So 7A again is all of this on the classroom lesson plan. And then 7B deals with the classroom lesson data collection plan. 7C is based on the small group lesson plans. 7D is based on the small group data collection plan. And then 7E is the reflection on the lesson plan. Now, what I wanted to point out to you on 7E, as I said earlier, I wanted to show you this. 7E in the first rubric that came out had 3 points, 7E1, 7E2, 7E3. However, if you click on this link, which I am going to show you, the RAMP rubric has been updated, and this was just in March of 2021. So this is found on the ASCA website at schoolcounselor.org. But you can see it does talk about the modifications that will be made if you're planning to submit in October of 2021 using the 2021 school year data. So there are some things that, some sections that have been modified. But I wanted to show you under section 7, the reflection now only has 7E1. So the prompt is how the selected ASCA mindsets and behaviors inform the lesson content. So this is a maximum of 250 words. So you would describe the mindsets and behaviors you chose, how you focused on them to choose what you were going to teach within the lesson or within the small group. So like I said, rather than the 3 prompts as there are here, it's now just down to 1 prompt, and that's as of March 2021. Whether that changes for the next RAMP application cycle remains to be seen. So I want to thank you for joining me tonight, and if you have any questions, I should have put in here my email. It is epfeiffer@paschoolcounselor.org, and you can find that on the website as well. Our next RAMP webinar will be on the next section, which is section 8, Classroom Instruction Results Report. So that's going to be held on May 13th at 7 o'clock in the evening. If you want to register for that, you would go to our website, www.paschoolcounselor.org/RAMP. And when you go there, you'll find not only the registration link for the upcoming webinars. You can see we have 3 more. So we have section 8, and then section 9 and section 10. So you'll find the registration link there for those, but you will also find all of the previously recorded webinars. This one will be posted there as well. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and email me. If you go to the website, paschoolcounselor.org, you'll be able to find my contact information there as well. But it's just epfeiffer@paschoolcounselor.org. So again, thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully we will see you at the next webinar.